Lesson 4.2, compare and order rational numbers. A rational number is a number that can be expressed as a ratio of two integers written as a fraction in which the denominator is not zero. So again, a rational number can be expressed as a ratio of two integers as a fraction, but our denominator can never be zero. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to compare rational numbers. So a common denominator is a common multiple of the denominators of two or more fractions. The least common denominator, or the LCD, is the least common multiple of the denominators. So we can use the least common denominator to compare fractions. And we can also use a number line. So again, when we're comparing fractions, we need to find a common denominator. What's common between the two? So the first one, example A, says use a number line to compare negative 5 and 5/9 and negative 5 and 1/9. Okay? So we know we have negative 5 and 5/9 and negative 5 and 1/9. It's between 5 and 6. So we have 5 whole ones, but we don't have enough to make that 6th one yet. So we need to finish our number line here. So since I'm in ninths, I'm going to break it into 9 different sections. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and label those. And then I'm going to compare them. So I'm going to find negative 5 and 5/9 on my graph and negative 5 and 1/9. So I have negative 5 and 5/9, and then we have negative 5 and 1/9. So when I compare these, I'm figuring out which one is bigger, which one is smaller. So when we're working with negatives, the number closest to 0 is our smallest number. So we would say negative 5 and 5/9 is less than negative 5 and 1/9. So again, if we look at our number line, we have negative 5 and 5/9. That's smaller than negative 5 and 1/9. Because the closer to 0 we are with our negatives, the bigger it is. Okay, if we look at example B, we have 5/6 is what to 7/9. Okay, so again, we're comparing 5/6 and 7/9. It's hard to compare 6 and 9, so we need to find a common denominator. What's common between both of those? What do they both go into? Well, I know they both go into 36. So I'm going to change both fractions to be in 36. I know 6 times 6 gives me 36. So if I take the denominator times 6, I have to take the numerator times 6. So I have 30. And I know that 9 times 4 gives me 36. And again, if I take the denominator times 4, I have to take the numerator times 4. So 7 times 4 is 28. Now that I have a common denominator, I'm working in 36. I can compare the numerators. So 30 and 28. I know that 30 is greater than 28, so we would say 30/36 is greater than 28/36. Okay? If we look at example D, we have negative 9/16 is what to negative 7/10. Again, I need to get common denominators. I'm working in 16ths and tenths. Those are hard to compare. So I know that 16 and 10 both go into 80. It's 16 times 5 is 80. So since I take the denominator times 5, I have to take the numerator times 5. So we get 45, and again, this is negative, so I bring my negative sign. Then we have negative 7/10. Again, I know 10 goes into 88 times, so I take 7 times 8, which is 56. So now I can compare. So I compare the numerators. I have negative 45 and negative 56. So then I have to stop and ask myself, which one is bigger? Is negative 45 or negative 46? Well, we know that negative 45 is bigger because it's closer to 0. So we'd say negative 45 over 80 is greater than negative 56 over 80. Okay, if we flip over to the next page, example E. In a second period class, 37.5% of students like to bowl. In a fifth period class, 12 out of 29 students like to bowl. In which class does a greater fraction of students like to bowl? So now we're comparing 37.5% to 12 out of 29 students. Okay, when we're comparing, again, it's got to be in the same form. So either we make in percents, decimals, or fractions. I like to work with decimals because I can change 37.5% to a decimal. I take my decimal point and I move it to the left twice. So this would be 0.375 thousandths. And I know I can take 12/29 and make that a decimal. So I take numerator divided by denominator, and I'd get 414 thousandths. Okay, so now I can compare. So I look at my wholes place, they're 0. I can't compare those. Then I move over to the tenths. I have a 3 and a 4. Well, I know 4 is bigger than 3, and it says in which class does a greater fraction of students like to bowl? Well, it would be this class because 4 is greater than 3, so we would say 5th period class. So again, when we're comparing, we got to get them in the same form. So either percents, fractions, or decimal, whichever makes sense to you. Okay, then the next thing is we're going to order rational numbers. Okay, so we can order rational numbers by using place value. So if we look at letter F, it says order the set 23%, 21 hundredths, 1/4, and 1/5 from least to greatest. Again, when I order, they have to be in the same form. I have percent, a decimal, and a fraction here. I have to pick one of those forms. Which form do I like? Well, I like to use decimals. So I'm going to change 23% to a decimal, which would be 23 hundredths. Then I have 21 hundredths, 1/4 as a decimal, it's 25 hundredths, and 1/5 as a decimal is 2/10. Okay, now I can compare those. So I always start in the wholes place. I have 0, 0, 0, 0. We can't compare those, so we move to the tens place. We have a 2, a 2, a 2, and a 2. Again, they're the same, so we got to keep moving. So I compare the hundreds place. I have a 3, a 1, a 5, and a 0. Okay, so I want to go from least to greatest, so I pick my smallest number. I know that 0 is smaller than 3, 1, and 5, so I'd start with 1/5. Okay, now I got to move to the next smallest. I have a 1, a 3, and a 5. I know that 1 is smaller. And then I keep moving, so then I have 23%. And last, our 5 is the biggest. So we would say it'd be 1/5, 21 hundredths, 23%, and 1/4. So again, when you're comparing and you're ordering rational numbers, you have to get them in the same form, whether they are fractions, decimals, or percent, whichever makes sense to you, so they're easier to compare.